The wind swept across the base that morning, carrying a chill that made everyone tighten their jackets. It was inspection day, and every officer stood in straight lines on the cracked pavement, boots polished, eyes forward. Among them was Lena, a quiet young officer who had never once failed a test, never once complained, and never once asked for more than her share. She had worked her way up from a small-town cadet program to this base, tucked far from the city, where people came and went without making much noise. She wasn't the kind to draw attention. Her life followed a rhythm: morning drills, reports, maintenance, training, and long nights staring at the stars from the runway, imagining the sky her father once flew through. He had been a pilot 2 years ago, before disappearing on a mission that was wiped from every record. The military called it a storm accident, but no wreckage was ever found. Her mother had never spoken about it again, only giving Lena his old uniform button and a small worn emblem shaped like a falcon with a scratch on its wing. Lena had stitched it secretly into the inside of her own uniform jacket, not to defy anyone, but because it reminded her why she joined in the first place. That morning, though, something felt different. The commanding officer barked orders with a tension that wasn't usual. There was talk of a surprise inspection ordered from high command, something about a security breach and missing identification tags. The air grew heavy with worry. Everyone was told to stand still as 2 senior officers walked down the line, checking badges, belts, and even pockets. Then, out of nowhere, one of them gave an order that made the entire row shift in discomfort. He told everyone to remove their jackets for a full inspection. A murmur spread down the line. It was unusual, even disrespectful. Uniforms weren't just clothing. They were identity, pride, and protection. Taking them off in public like that was unheard of. But rules were rules. When the commanding voice repeated the order, the first few soldiers hesitated before reluctantly unbuttoning. Lena's heart began to race. She could already feel the emblem pressing against the fabric on her chest as if it knew it was about to be exposed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she touched the buttons. She didn't want anyone to see what was inside. It wasn't regulation. It wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. But refusing a direct order would draw attention, and attention was the last thing she ever wanted. The officer in charge moved closer, his sharp eyes catching every motion. He didn't know her by name, just as one of many quiet faces who always followed the rules. "Move faster," he barked, and she swallowed hard, unfastening the final button. Her jacket came loose, revealing the dark inner lining she'd stitched by hand years ago. For a second, she thought no one would notice the small glint of silver hidden under the fold. But then from the back of the room, a low voice spoke, calm, older, but carrying authority that silenced everyone instantly. "Stop." The voice belonged to a general. No one expected him to be there. He rarely attended these inspections, yet now he was standing by the doorway, his expression unreadable. He walked slowly toward Lena, his boots echoing against the floor. The room felt frozen. Even the officer who gave the order straightened nervously, unsure what was happening. The general's gaze didn't leave Lena's jacket. He leaned closer, studying the small emblem that had caught the light. His hand, rough and lined with years of service, hovered just above the fabric as if touching something sacred. The silence stretched so long that Lena's pulse began to roar in her ears. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. His tone wasn't angry, it was something else. Something like disbelief. Lena looked down, unsure how to answer. "It belonged to my father, sir," she said softly. "He was a pilot. Before I joined." The general didn't move for several seconds. The other officers exchanged puzzled glances. He finally straightened, eyes distant as if staring through time. "What was his name?" he asked, though Lena could tell he already knew he'd heard it before. When she told him, his shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. He stepped back and gave a short command to the others. "Inspection's over," he said firmly. Everyone else dismissed. No one dared question him. The courtyard emptied within minutes until only Lena and the general remained. She stood rigidly, not sure whether she was in trouble or about to be questioned further. The general didn't speak immediately. He just kept looking at the inside of her jacket, then finally met her eyes. "Follow me," he said. They walked down the corridor, the sound of distant machinery humming through the walls. The general's pace was slow but deliberate, his hands clasped behind his back. Lena followed in silence, her mind full of questions she didn't dare ask. When they reached his office, he closed the door quietly and stood by the window, staring out at the runway where planes were landing in the golden afternoon light. He finally turned. "That emblem," he said, voice steady but heavy, "hasn't been seen on this base in over 20 years. Lena frowned slightly. "It's just a keepsake, sir. My father's. I didn't think you couldn't have known," he interrupted softly. "But I did." He moved to a cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out an old photograph. The edges were yellowed and the faces in it were faint, but Lena could make out several uniformed men standing proudly beside a jet. One of them looked familiar, not because she'd met him, but because his eyes were the same color as hers. "That was your father," the general said quietly, placing the photo on the desk. "We served together." Lena's breath caught. She leaned closer. Her father stood at the center of the group, smiling faintly, his hand resting on the very same emblem she now carried. The falcon, the same scratch across its wing. She had seen that smile in only one place, the old family photo her mother kept beside the bed. The general sighed, sitting down slowly, as if the weight of years had just caught up to him. He was one of the finest pilots I ever commanded. Brave, steady, the kind of man people followed without question. The day his mission went down, we lost more than a plane. We lost trust. And what followed, well, it was buried so deep most people never knew the truth. Lena felt her throat tighten. What truth? The general didn't answer right away. He looked at the emblem again. That emblem wasn't just decoration. It was part of a classified identification system. Only members of one special rescue unit carried it, Falcon Squadron. Their missions were off record. If anyone ever found out what they did, it could have caused serious political damage. Your father's disappearance wasn't an accident, Lieutenant. But that's all I can tell you right now. She didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded in her chest. All her life she'd imagined her father's story ending in a storm, in silence. But now she wasn't sure of anything. Why was his name erased? She asked quietly. The general's jaw clenched. Because someone wanted it that way. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the hum of aircraft filled the air again. A distant reminder that life on the base continued as usual, even when secrets lingered behind closed doors. The general finally stood and handed her the photo. "Keep this," he said, "and that emblem. They belong to you now. But understand this. Once you start asking questions about Falcon Squadron, there's no turning back." Lena nodded slowly, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. She didn't fully understand what was unfolding, but something inside her told her this moment wasn't a coincidence. It was a beginning. The general turned toward the window again, his reflection pale against the glass. "Your father once told me something," he said softly. "He said the hardest part of wearing a uniform isn't the duty. It's carrying the truth that others will never know." Lena looked down at the emblem stitched into her jacket, the tiny falcon gleaming under the light. Her father's hands had once held it. Now it was hers. She straightened, eyes steady. "With all respect, sir," she said, "I think it's time someone knew." The general didn't smile, but a faint look of recognition passed over his face, the same expression he'd given her father years ago before sending him into the storm. He gave a slow nod. "Then we'll start there." Outside, the sky was darkening. The wind picked up again, sweeping dust across the runway. Lena walked out of the office, clutching the photo, feeling the cold air sting her face. For the first time since she'd joined, she didn't feel like just another officer standing in line. She felt connected to something much larger, something unfinished. And behind her, in that quiet office, the general sat alone, staring at the old photograph, wondering if this was fate's way of giving him one more chance to make things right. After leaving the office, Lena walked across the quiet base, the photo clutched tightly in her hands. The sun was slipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. Her mind was racing, replaying the general's words over and over. Falcon Squadron. A secret mission. Her father hadn't simply vanished. He had been part of something bigger, something hidden. The thought made her stomach twist. Questions piled up faster than she could imagine answering them. She returned to her small quarters, the room filled with familiar items she had brought from home. Her uniform jacket hung neatly on a hook, but she couldn't bring herself to put it away. That emblem pressed against her chest like a heartbeat, reminding her that the past she thought she knew was only half the story. She sat at her desk, placing the photograph beside her lamp. The faces of the men in the P. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, she opened it to find Lieutenant Harper, a colleague she trusted, standing there. He looked uneasy. "Lieutenant Lena, I heard about the inspection," he said carefully. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly, unsure what to say. She couldn't tell him about the emblem or the secret mission. Not yet. Not until she understood it herself. "I'm fine," she said. "Just processing." Harper nodded and hesitated before speaking again. "If you need anything, I'm here. We've worked together for a long time. I've got your back." Lena appreciated the offer, but she knew this was something she had to face alone. The truth about her father and the emblem was hers and no one else's. She closed the door quietly and sat back down, staring at the photo. Questions gnawed at her. Why had the general frozen at the emblem? Why had it been hidden for so long? And most importantly, what had really happened to her father? The next day, she was called back to the general's office. The hallways were empty, the base unusually silent, as if it too was holding its breath. Lena followed him inside. This time he gestured for her to sit across from his desk. The light from the window fell across his face, revealing lines etched deep from years of responsibility and regret. "I want you to understand," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "that the mission your father was on wasn't simple. It was dangerous in ways even most of us couldn't imagine. Falcon Squadron was created for one purpose: to go where no one else could, to do what no one else could, and to return only if survival was certain. Your father was part of that team because he was the best. The emblem you carry, it wasn't decoration. It was a key, a symbol of trust. If it ever appeared where it shouldn't, it could reveal operations that were never meant to exist." Lena listened intently, leaning forward. Her mind was a mix of fear and awe. The emblem wasn't just a memory. It was proof. Proof that her father had been part of something vital, something heroic, even if it had been hidden from the world. The general continued, his eyes darkening. "The mission went wrong. We lost communication. The reports we filed said it was a storm, an accident. But the truth is harder to accept. Your father covered the retreat of his team. He made sure the others survived. He didn't die by accident. He sacrificed himself in a way that no one could know, because if it became public, it would have caused political fallout we couldn't afford. His name was erased. His heroism, hidden." Lena's hands shook slightly as she absorbed the words. Her father had always been a hero in her eyes, but now she understood the scale of his courage. He hadn't vanished because of misfortune. He had chosen to protect others, and the world had been told he was gone. "Why tell me now?" she asked quietly. "Why show me this emblem after all these years?" The general leaned back, his gaze distant. "Because I made mistakes," he admitted. "I followed orders that hurt people. I let lies bury truth. I see in you the same determination your father had. You carry more than a uniform or a badge. You carry his legacy, and I believe it's time someone finally knew, even if only a little, what really happened." For the first time, Lena felt a flicker of purpose that went beyond duty. This wasn't about her career or even about finding her father. It was about honoring what he had done, about understanding the man he had been and the sacrifices he had made. The general stood and moved to a cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a thin folder, yellowed with age. Inside were reports, photos, and documents she couldn't fully comprehend. He handed them to her carefully. "These are pieces of the mission," he said. "Some are declassified, some still restricted. Look at them, learn, understand, and be careful. The past has a way of following those who dig too deep." Lena opened the folder. The documents were filled with technical details, flight coordinates, and cryptic notes. There were photographs of planes in formation, of men in flight suits, and a small image of her father's squadron standing together, smiling despite the danger. Her eyes landed on the emblem in the photograph, the same falcon with the scratch she now carried. A lump rose in her throat. "Your father trusted no one with that emblem," the general said softly. "He carried it with him on every mission, knowing that someday someone like you might need to see it. You are that someone. It was never meant to be seen by the world, only by those who understand what it represents." Lena nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the responsibility. She wasn't sure she fully understood it yet. But she knew this was bigger than her own life, bigger than the base, bigger than the orders she followed every day. This was about truth, about history, and about remembering the people who had been erased from it. The general walked to the window again, staring out at the runway. "There's someone left from your father's team," he said, almost to himself. "One person who might still be alive. An engineer who was part of the mission. Everyone else? Gone, or so the records say. But I have reason to believe he survived. He could tell you more." Lena's heart skipped a beat.
Alive?
She whispered. "Yes," the general said. "But he's hidden. Changed his identity, fearful of what might happen if anyone found him. You'll need to be careful, and you'll need to earn his trust. That man knows more than anyone else about what truly happened that day." A sense of urgency filled her. This wasn't just a story she was reading in a folder. This was real. Someone who had served with her father, someone who had survived the same dangers, could still be out there waiting to tell the truth. Lena felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She had trained for missions, for challenges, but this was different. This was personal. The general's gaze softened, almost fatherly. "I didn't tell you this lightly," he said. "You have a choice. You can continue your career quietly, follow orders like everyone else, or you can pursue the truth. But if you do, there's no turning back. The past doesn't forgive mistakes easily." Lena looked down at the emblem, tracing the scratch on the falcon's wing with her fingertip. It was small, almost insignificant, but it carried the weight of decades. Her father's courage, his sacrifice, the secrets he protected, all of it rested in her hands now. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "I want to know the truth." The general gave a faint nod, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight of relief and approval. "Good," he said. "Then we start with what we know and work forward. The first step is to find the engineer. He's cautious, smart, and he trusts no one. You'll need patience, you'll need respect, and you'll need to show him that you carry the same values your father did." Lena left the office feeling a mixture of determination and nervousness. The base was quiet, but in her mind it was alive with questions, possibilities, and paths she hadn't imagined before. She had been a soldier following orders, but now she was a daughter searching for answers. That night she sat on the edge of her bed, the folder open beside her. Every page she turned, every photograph she studied made her feel closer to her father and yet farther away. She wondered what he would say if he were there, if he could guide her through this. She imagined his voice calm and steady, telling her to be patient, to trust her instincts, and to never forget who she was. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of flying, of missions long past, of a team that had vanished into the storm. The falcon emblem gleamed in her dreams, a symbol of courage and hope. And when morning arrived, Lena woke with a resolve stronger than ever. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult. There would be obstacles, questions without answers, and moments when the truth seemed just out of reach. But she also knew she carried a legacy that demanded action, a story that needed to be uncovered, and a connection to her father that could no longer be ignored. The first step was clear. She would find the engineer. She would uncover what truly happened to her father, and she would honor the memory of Falcon Squadron. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the presence of her father, guiding her forward, urging her not to turn back. The base awakened around her. Planes roared in the distance, and Lena tightened her jacket over the emblem. She felt ready, determined, and more connected than ever to the father she had lost, to the mission he had carried, and to the truth that had been hidden for far too long. Lena spent the next few days preparing quietly. She studied the folder the general had given her over and over, memorizing names, locations, and flight records. Every document seemed to hold another piece of the puzzle, but she knew that the papers alone couldn't tell the full story. There was only one way to truly understand what had happened to her father. She had to find the engineer who had survived. The general gave her a small note with coordinates and a contact name, an old address along the coast, far from the base. "He is cautious," the general warned. "Trust must be earned. Move carefully and remember, patience will be your greatest ally." Lena nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just searching for information. She was stepping into the unknown, following in the footsteps of her father's courage, hoping she could handle the truths waiting for her. The drive to the coastal town was long and quiet. The landscape changed from the flat stretches of the base to rugged hills, narrow roads, and finally the open expanse of the ocean. She watched the waves crash against the cliffs, a reminder that some things in life were relentless and untamed, much like the secrets she was chasing. When she arrived at the address, it looked abandoned from the outside. Weathered wood and peeling paint made it seem as though no one had lived there for years. Lena parked her car a short distance away and approached on foot, cautious, listening to the wind and the distant call of seagulls. She checked the note one last time and knocked lightly on the door. There was a long silence. Then the door creaked open, revealing an old man, bent slightly with age but with eyes that were sharp and alert. He studied her silently before speaking. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice rough but controlled. Lena held out the small photograph and the folder from the general. "I'm looking for someone who served with my father," she said quietly. "I think you knew him." The man's eyes flickered toward the photograph. He reached out and touched it gently, as if feeling the memory of the people frozen in the image. "I knew them all," he said slowly. "But it's been a long time. Dangerous times." He paused, then studied Lena closely. "And you? You are who I think you are?" "I am his daughter," Lena replied, her voice steady though her heart pounded in her chest. "I want to know what really happened. I want to understand what my father went through." The man's face softened slightly, though his eyes remained wary. "It's not simple," he said. "You are stepping into a story that was meant to die in the past. Many wanted it buried, and even now, telling it can bring trouble." "I understand," Lena said, "but I have to know. For him and for everyone who was lost. I have the emblem. He carried it with him, and now I do too. It's proof, please. Let me hear what happened." For a long moment, the man remained silent. Then he stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. Inside, the house was sparse but neat. A small fire burned in the corner, and papers and old flight manuals were stacked carefully on a table. He gestured for her to sit. "I am called Simon," he said. "I was the engineer on that mission. I am the last living person who can tell you the truth." He took a deep breath and began. "Your father was extraordinary. Brave, yes, but more than that. He had a sense of duty that drove him beyond fear. That mission, it wasn't just any assignment. We were sent into hostile territory where failure meant more than death. It meant the collapse of everything we believed in, everything we worked for." Lena listened, leaning forward. The wind rattled the windows, adding an eerie echo to his words. "The storm," Simon continued, "was real, but it was not the only danger. There were others. Plans within plans, people who didn't want the mission to succeed. Your father knew it. He always knew. And when the moment came, when our aircraft was surrounded and our signals cut off, he made the choice to ensure that others could survive. He stayed behind, held the line, and made sure the rest of us escaped. That is why he disappeared. That is why the world believes he was lost in the storm. But it was not an accident. It was sacrifice." Tears pricked Lena's eyes, but she stayed quiet. She had imagined her father's bravery, but hearing it from someone who had lived it made her heart ache with a mix of pride and sorrow. "After that," Simon said, "the operation was buried. All reports were destroyed or altered. Anyone who knew too much was told to forget. And the emblem, your father made sure it was hidden in case someone came searching, someone who could carry on the truth. You were that someone." Lena touched the emblem on her jacket instinctively, feeling its weight as if it were more than fabric and metal. It was a connection, a lifeline to her father and now to the man sitting across from her who had survived the impossible. Simon leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You must understand, this knowledge carries responsibility. There are people who would prefer it remained buried, but if it is to live, if the story is to be told, it must be done carefully. You must honor your father and the others. You cannot let this be twisted or misused." "I understand," Lena said. "I want to honor them. I want to know everything you can tell me." For hours, Simon spoke. He told her of the mission, the betrayals, the impossible choices, and the small moments of courage that kept the team going. He described her father's calm in the face of danger, how he protected the lives of others above his own, and how he refused to abandon anyone, even when the odds were impossible. Lena listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes holding back tears. Every detail painted a picture she had never known, a reality more heroic and tragic than any story she had imagined. Finally, Simon paused and looked at her with intensity. "Your father left a message," he said, reaching under the table. He pulled out a small worn device and a recorder covered in dust and scratches. He wanted someone to hear it if anything happened. He hoped you would be that person. It's short, but listen carefully. It is everything he wanted you to know. Lena took the device with trembling hands, her heart pounding. She pressed play, and her father's voice came through, calm and steady, though faint and scratched by time. He spoke of duty, sacrifice, trust, and hope. He spoke of the team, the mission, and the choices that had defined their lives. And at the end, he spoke directly to her, a promise that one day she would understand, and a reminder to carry forward the courage and integrity he had lived by. Lena's hands shook as the words sank in. The room felt small, filled with the echoes of the past and the weight of the stories long hidden. She looked at Simon, who nodded slightly, as if confirming that the message was the final piece of the puzzle. "You carry more than a uniform," Simon said quietly. "You carry their legacy. It is your choice how to use it. And if you choose wisely, it can bring justice, remembrance, and honor to those who were lost." Lena took a deep breath and touched the emblem again. She felt her father's presence in a way she never had before, not just as a memory but as a guiding force. She realized that finding Simon and hearing his words was only the beginning. The real work was understanding the full story and finding a way to honor it. She stayed with Simon late into the night, asking questions, listening to anecdotes, and learning about her father's friends and colleagues, those who had survived and those who had not. Each story brought new understanding, and each one left her more determined to uncover the complete truth. When she finally left the small coastal house, the wind was colder, the night darker, but her heart was lighter. She had taken the first step into her father's world and seen the bravery, sacrifice, and loyalty he had carried. The emblem under her jacket glinted faintly in the moonlight, a symbol of what she now carried forward. Driving back toward the base, Lena replayed the recorder in her mind. Every word of her father's voice, every detail Simon had shared stayed with her. She knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. She would face questions, obstacles, and resistance, but she also knew she was ready. She had a guide in Simon, a symbol in the emblem, and a father whose courage she could now truly understand. As she arrived back at the base, the lights of the runway stretched out before her. The plane sat in silence, waiting for the dawn, just as she waited for the next step in uncovering the truth. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a certainty that she had never known before, that her father's legacy and the story of Falcon Squadron would not be lost again. The night was quiet, but Lena's mind was alive with purpose. She knew the path forward would not be easy, but for the first time she felt connected to her father in a way that went beyond memory or photograph. She felt his courage, his determination, and his trust in her, and she would not fail him. The days after meeting Simon were restless. Lena couldn't focus on routine drills or paperwork. Her mind replayed his words, the stories of her father, the team, and the mission. She had finally heard the truth, at least partially, and the hunger to know more burned inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about the other members of Falcon Squadron, the people who had risked everything, and the secrets still hidden. Simon had warned her that the path ahead would not be easy. "Some people," he said, "do not want the past to surface. You need to be cautious. Not everyone can be trusted. Even now, some shadows from that mission linger in places you cannot see." Lena felt the weight of those words. She had thought the mission was long over, history buried with her father, but Simon had opened a door, and she was ready to walk through it. The next morning, she began her search in earnest. Using the clues Simon had given her, she started tracing records of the surviving team members. Most names led to dead ends, addresses that no longer existed, records destroyed, or people who had vanished. But one name kept coming up in small, almost invisible traces, an engineer named Harris. According to the notes, he had survived long after the mission, but disappeared under unusual circumstances. His trail was faint, almost deliberately hidden. Lena knew finding him would not be simple. She packed a small bag, tucked the emblem securely inside her jacket, and set off to follow the few leads she had. Each step felt heavy with history, each mile closer to understanding her father's life and the sacrifices he had made. The journey took her across narrow country roads, through towns that seemed forgotten, and finally to a small industrial area near the mountains. The streets were quiet, The buildings worn and abandoned, but one old workshop seemed active. Smoke drifted from the chimney and a faint light glimmered through a dusty window. She approached cautiously, listening for any sounds. Inside, she could see a figure moving among tools and machinery. The man was older, with graying hair and a hunched back, but there was a careful precision in his movements. Lena hesitated at the door, unsure if she should announce herself. Then she remembered Simon's advice: patience, respect, and trust. She knocked softly. The man stopped and turned sharply. His eyes narrowed as he studied her. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice wary and firm. "My name is Lena," she said calmly, showing him the photograph of her father and the squadron. "I'm his daughter. I was told you might know the truth about what happened to Falcon Squadron." For a long moment, he didn't respond. He studied her hands, her face, and then the emblem that peeked from under her jacket. His eyes widened slightly. "You carry it?" he whispered. "The Falcon emblem?" Lena nodded. "I do. He left it for me, for someone who could understand, please. I want to know everything." The man's expression softened, though still cautious. "I am Harris," he said finally. "If you are truly who you claim to be, then you should come in. But understand this. What you are about to hear is dangerous." It was never meant to be revealed. She followed him into the workshop. The walls were lined with tools, blueprints, and mechanical parts. It smelled of oil and metal, a reminder of a life dedicated to machines and precision. Harris gestured for her to sit, then closed the door behind her carefully. He began slowly, recounting details of the mission that Simon had not mentioned. "We were sent into a restricted zone, beyond what any normal unit could handle. The plan was precise, but betrayal was hidden in plain sight. Some people in command did not want the mission to succeed. They saw it as a threat to their interests. Your father knew this. He knew the danger was not only from the terrain or enemies, but from those who were supposed to protect us." Lena listened, absorbing each word. The mission had been more than a test of skill. It had been a maze of deceit, politics, and life-or-death decisions. Her father's courage had been extraordinary, but the complexity of the situation made it even more remarkable. "The storm was real," Harris continued. "But it was not the only danger. When the aircraft were surrounded, communication cut off. Your father made a decision that changed everything. He stayed behind, drew the enemy's attention, and gave the rest of us a chance to escape. He sacrificed himself, knowing it would erase his own record and leave his family with only questions. That emblem you carry, it was a key, a mark to prove his identity and a reminder that his story is not finished." Lena felt her chest tighten. Each revelation made her father's heroism more vivid, more real. But it also brought pain. The knowledge of his suffering, the weight of the secrecy, the lives affected by decisions no one else would ever understand. "Why show me now?" she asked softly. "Why let me see this?" Harris paused. "Because he trusted you. He believed that one day someone like you would carry the truth forward. And because some things cannot stay buried forever. You have to decide what to do with it. But first you need to understand every part of it." He led her to a small cabinet and pulled out a worn case. Inside were documents, maps, and a small device. "This was recovered from the wreckage," and he explained. "It belonged to your father. It contains his final message and the details of the mission. He wanted you to hear it, to know what really happened and to understand the sacrifices made. But be careful. Some names in here should never be repeated outside this room." Lena took the device and held it gently. The weight in her hands felt heavier than any folder or photograph. It was more than a message. It was a bridge to the past, a connection to her father, and proof of everything Simon and Harris had described. She pressed play. His voice filled the room, calm and deliberate, recounting moments of fear, courage, and loyalty. He spoke of choices that no one else could understand, of sacrifices made to protect lives, and of the hope that someone would one day know the truth. Every word seemed to echo in the small workshop, filling the space with a presence that felt real and immediate. When the message ended, Lena looked at Harris. "He trusted me with this," she said quietly, "and I promise, I will honor him. I will make sure his story is remembered." Harris nodded. "Then you understand. This is bigger than duty. It is legacy, and if you carry it carefully, it can bring justice and remembrance to those who were lost. But be warned, there are people who still would prefer it stayed hidden. You must be cautious in the next steps." Lena left the workshop as the sun began to set. The streets were quiet, the town almost asleep. But inside her she felt awake in a way she had never been before. She had uncovered truths, connected with people who had lived the mission, and heard her father's voice once again. Each step she took felt purposeful, guided by the knowledge that she carried something vital. A story of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. Back at the base, she spent hours going over the notes Harris had given her. She traced every name, every location, every detail she could find. She began planning her next moves carefully. There were still questions that remained unanswered. Who had betrayed them? Why the mission had been buried, and what risks still lingered? But she also felt a growing sense of determination. She wasn't just a daughter searching for answers anymore. She was someone who could carry forward a legacy. She could honor her father and the team, uncover the truth, and ensure that their sacrifices were not forgotten. The next morning, Lena walked across the base, the emblem under her jacket glinting in the sunlight. She moved with purpose, each step a reminder of the journey she had begun. The past was no longer a mystery. She had pieces of it now, and she would follow them wherever they led. As the day went on, she reflected on the courage of her father and his team. They had faced impossible odds, betrayal, and danger, yet they remained committed to each other and to their mission. Lena felt their presence beside her, guiding her, reminding her that she was not alone in this search. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had the tools, the guidance, and the determination to continue. She would find the answers, uncover the full story, and honor the legacy of Falcon Squadron. And somewhere deep inside, she felt her father's spirit steady and unwavering, urging her forward. The night came quietly over the base, but Lena's mind remained alert, replaying every word she had heard, every piece of information she had gathered. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and perhaps the first confrontation with those who wanted the truth hidden. But she was ready. She had heard the voices of the past, seen the courage of those who had sacrificed, and felt the emblem under her jacket as a constant reminder of what she carried forward. Lena closed her eyes briefly, letting the memories and lessons of the day settle. The journey was far from over, but she no longer felt lost. She was connected to her father, to the team, and to the mission that had defined their lives. And with each step, she would honor them, uncover the truth, and carry their story into the future. The morning was quiet when Lena left her quarters. The base was already alive with activity, but she moved through it with purpose. Every step felt heavier than usual, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of responsibility, the responsibility of uncovering a truth long hidden and honoring a legacy that had been kept secret for too long. She carried the emblem beneath her jacket like a shield, a symbol of her father's courage and the sacrifices of Falcon Squadron. The general had called her into his office again, a rare meeting that felt both urgent and important. She knocked lightly and entered. He was sitting behind his desk, hands folded, eyes serious but calm. "Good," he said. "You are ready. Today, you will see the final piece of the story. The last living member who can tell you everything, and the person who holds the records that complete the mission." Lena felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She had already met Simon and Harris, but she knew this next step would bring answers to the questions that had haunted her since she first discovered the emblem. "Where do I find them?" she asked. The general handed her a small envelope. Inside was an address, simple and unadorned. "Be careful," he said. "They are cautious. They trust very few. And they remember everything. You must earn that trust or you will learn nothing." Lena left without another word, her mind focused. The drive was long, passing through open fields and quiet towns until she reached a small house nestled near a forest. It looked ordinary, unremarkable, but she could sense the weight of years hidden inside. She parked quietly and approached on foot, taking slow, careful steps. When she knocked, the door opened to reveal a man in his 70s. His posture was strong despite his age, and his eyes were sharp, almost piercing. "You are not supposed to be here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I am Lena," she said. "I'm the daughter of one of your teammates. I need to know the truth about the mission, about Falcon Squadron." The man's expression softened, but his eyes never left hers. "Come in," he said finally. "You are brave to come here. But you must understand, what I tell you could change everything you thought you knew. It could make some people uncomfortable. And it could put you at risk if the wrong people find out. Lena nodded. She had come this far, and she would not turn back. Inside, the house was filled with old documents, maps, and photographs. The man gestured for her to sit. "I am Colonel Hayes," he said. "I was the commanding officer on the mission. I've carried these memories and these records for decades. You are here because your father trusted you, and because you carry his emblem. That symbol is a key, a proof that you are the one who must see this." He began to recount the mission in detail. Every decision, every risk, every moment of courage. Lena listened carefully, absorbing the full scope of what her father and his team had faced. The mission had been more complex than she had imagined. A combination of strategy, sacrifice, and sheer determination against impossible odds. Her father had stayed behind during the final operation, ensuring the safety of the others. His actions had prevented disaster, but they had also erased his own presence from official records. The world had been told he was lost in the storm. But Hayes explained the truth. He had chosen to stay, to protect, and to sacrifice himself knowingly. "I see now why the emblem was hidden," Lena said quietly. "It was more than a symbol. It was proof of his courage, of his choices, of what he carried for all of you." "Yes," Hayes replied. "It was also a message, a reminder that even when the world forgets, someone must remember. Your father believed that someone would be you." He handed her a folder filled with documents and photographs. "These are the final records," he said. "Names, locations, reports, and everything that proves the truth. Take them, learn them, and honor them. But be cautious. There are people who still believe some things are better left buried. Your father and his team paid a price to protect that truth. You now carry that responsibility." Lena took the folder with trembling hands. She felt the weight of history pressing on her, the gravity of responsibility and the connection to her father stronger than ever. She realized that this was not just about uncovering a story. It was about carrying forward a legacy, about making sure that sacrifice was never forgotten. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Why let me carry this?" Hayes looked at her with intensity. "Because you understand duty. You understand honor, and you have the courage to carry a story that is bigger than yourself. Your father believed that you could handle it, and I believe it too. The world may never know the full truth, but it must not be lost. It must be remembered even quietly through you." Lena nodded. "I will honor them. I will carry this story carefully and make sure it is remembered." Hayes smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and relief. "Then you are ready. But remember, truth is powerful and it can be dangerous. You must be patient, deliberate, and cautious. This is not just about history. It is about protecting the memory of those who gave everything." For hours, Lena went through the records, studying every photograph, every report, every detail. She saw her father's hand in every decision, his courage in every action, and his loyalty in every choice. The truth was overwhelming, but it filled her with purpose. She felt connected to him in a way she never had before, as though his spirit was guiding her through every page. When she finally left the house, the sky was dark, but the stars were bright. Lena walked slowly to her car, the folder safely tucked under her arm, the emblem pressing against her chest. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had found the truth, and now she carried it forward. Back at the base, she met the general one last time. "I have everything," she said, placing the folder and emblem in front of him. "I know the story now. I understand their courage, their sacrifice, and the choices they made. I will honor it as you asked." The general studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You have done well," he said. "Your father would be proud, and you have carried his legacy forward. That is the greatest honor you can give." Lena felt a lump in her throat. She had started this journey searching for answers, but now she realized it was more than that. It was about connection, understanding, and remembrance. She had uncovered the truth, but she had also found a part of her father she never knew she could reach. The emblem on her chest glinted in the light. A small, simple symbol that held decades of history, courage, and sacrifice. She touched it gently, feeling the weight of the lives it represented, and she knew that no matter what happened next, she would carry it with pride, with honor, and with the understanding that some legacies are too important to be forgotten. That evening, Lena walked through the base one last time before returning to her quarters. She passed the empty training fields, the silent hangars, and the runway where planes sat quietly under the fading light. Everything felt different now, fuller, heavier, alive with the stories she had uncovered. She paused and looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the base. Lena felt a sense of peace she had never known. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought her clarity, understanding, and connection. She knew that her father's story and the story of Falcon Squadron would live on through her. As night fell, Lena placed the emblem and the photographs carefully on her desk. She sat quietly, thinking about her father, the team, and the sacrifices they had made. She felt their presence around her, guiding her, reminding her of the courage, loyalty, and honor that defined them. And she knew that she would continue to carry their story forward, carefully, with respect, and with the determination to make sure the world would never forget the heroes who had been lost, who had been erased, but whose legacy lived on in her. The base was quiet now, but Lena's heart was full. She had found the truth, faced the past, and discovered a connection to her father that would never fade. She had honored the sacrifices of Falcon Squadron, and she had become the keeper of their story. For the first time, she felt truly at peace. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her father was proud.